I don't know, just like my whole life, it's been, people like, oh, I would tell them that I'd have Tourette's and I had no idea, they never would have suspected it. And I would just feel like, yeah, well, there's like, I mean, now that I've mentioned it, I guarantee you, or if like I tell you the tics that like the most common ones that I do, I guarantee you'll see them now.
Welcome to the podcast. My name's Ben, and if you're just starting here at episode 1, you have the option of going back 1 to episode 0, which sets up the story behind this podcast and what my experience is with Tourette's, and that may be a better starting point to kind of build up to how we got here. The Cliff's Notes version, I was diagnosed with Tourette's when I was a kid, and I've basically lived that life in the shadows the best I could. Not telling anyone I have Tourette's because greater society, or at least pop culture, has not handled that kind of information as maturely as it should. And to dodge being part of the joke, and for fear of being reduced, I've just done my best to disguise my tics and not tell anybody I have it. And that's just a lame way to live. So what's helping me beat that and get out of that is to do something I just never attempted to do in my adult life, and what a lot of other people with Tourette's really haven't done much of either, and that's to talk to other people who have Tourette's and just kind of have a conversation about it. Just how we've navigated and negotiated with life with Tourette's. So that's the caveman drawing version of this story, but there's a lot more detail. So episode 0 is the place to start. And if you've already listened, thank you, and welcome to episode 1 with our first guest, Maddie, who was one of the first people I connected with on Twitter after putting out the word about this podcast. And Maddie and I talked about a month or so ago, and Tourette's has definitely been a central part of her life. But let me read you this, something she wrote. Many of my friends can't even see what I'm describing, yet this has been the biggest challenge in my life. It is part of my identity. It is part of me, and I'm okay with it. End quote. So that's not something she wrote to me in regard to this podcast. That's the opener to her college entrance essay, in which she describes what she's gone through with Tourette's. And I mean, right there, she's got Tourette's as a strength. She talks about the difficulties and, pre-diagnosis, when people didn't know what was going on with her. And if she ticked and if it became a problem in the eyes of the people around her, well, then a potentially logical thing for them to suggest is, stop it, control yourself. And if that's the reasonable solution around you, then it can be scary to know that within yourself, you can't stop it. There's really nothing you can do about it. And when she got the diagnosis and the confirmation that there really was nothing transformative that she could do about it in terms of stopping her tics, then she was able to accept herself and focus on her strengths. And with part of that, she also focused on other kids who were dealing with things like ADHD and being a positive force for them, knowing what they're going through. And I've definitely lived with ADD, so here we start off talking about our own common difficulty with structured academic environments, and then about the self-consciousness of having Tourette's and kind of finding a way to relax with it. And we also discover that we have some of the same specific tics. And I'm not just talking about the eye blinking or the head nodding stuff. I mean, in one case, we find out that we have the same really unusual, I think it's unusual, really unusual tic that we both thought nobody else had. So this thing is a build-up. I mean, I got to say, we start off just kind of talking casually, but then we get deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And there are some really powerful takeaways. So let's get right to it. And I think it would be great if we could kind of orbit a conversation around this. So use the hashtag Tourette's Pod. That's if you're a Twitter user. Hashtag Tourette's Pod. That'll just be kind of a go-to for comments about the show, questions, things like that. So... Oh, and there will be a Facebook group. As I speak now, it doesn't exist yet, but it's coming. Really want to make this a conversation. All right, here we go. Just so I get this right, could you state your name, where you live, and not your address or anything like that? Just generally the part of the world you live in, and then just briefly what you do, just how you would state who you are. Are you a stand-up comedian? Are you a teacher? Are you a student? Or just
Right. Okay. Well, I'm Maddie. I'm from Oakland, California, and I'm currently a student studying environmental science, and I'm about to graduate. So we'll see what I do next. Thank you.
So what drew you to environmental science?
Well, I think part of it is being from Oakland and, the Bay Area and just being like a very, I don't know, environmentally conscious area
Yeah.
and just living in it. I mean, there's trees everywhere. I have a lot of friends that would come and visit and they'd be like, well, we live in a forest. And I just kind of never really thought about that. And my dad he was a science major. And so I ended up starting off as a biology major. And then I realized I wanted to do more environmental biology. And the best way for me to do that, or to do exactly what I wanted to do, was to switch to environmental. And then I have a emphasis in ecology. So
Okay.
I don't know, ever since I switched to that major, I've just absolutely loved it and excelled. And I had this crazy switch of going from hating school, like, wanting to, when I was younger, I just never, I don't know, I
Hmm.
never really enjoyed the learning process and
Yeah, yeah.
institutionalized education and everything. And then,
Yeah, that's funny because that's kind of been my experience too. Is I just did not do well with school. I didn't like the structured environment. I mean, that's the word you
yeah,
used, and that's the perfect word because I'm way more of a just do it as I go type person.
yeah,
Just kind
same.
of learn by the experience, and well, for one, there's the ADHD part, but
Right, exactly.
and there's a lot of
Same.
things I want to do, and I feel like I say this to my fiance all the time. Is like I wish there were 36 hours in a day, because
Hmm.
there's I hate going to sleep at night. There's always something I want to fill that time with, and I feel like I'm wasting my
Right,
time if I'm not doing anything. And when it came to
right.
sort of somebody else's idea of how I should learn, it just did not take with me. So you kind of found your groove. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. It's been really nice because I mean, I don't know, I feel like I've had very much the same experience as what you were just saying. And I'm sure a lot of other kids like with, you know, ADHD or any other sort of learning difficulties or whatever it is have had kind of the similar experience. And I just never really liked that. I loved the social aspect of school, but and I liked
Yeah.
learning generally, but as I later found out when I was like first diagnosed with ADD was and did the full diagnosis and everything, they I have like a really bad short-term memory, and it's
Hmm.
not something that I would ever have noticed, but it's something that makes a lot more sense now when I think back on it. Like I was never like school is a lot of you know gather the information and regurgitate it, and I was never good at that. And
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason that I had a lot of like that I struggled a lot because I really have to like internalize information in order to um, do well in the subject, which is a good thing in like the long run, like understanding what you're learning. But
Yeah.
for school, a lot of times, just how tests work and just how like I would do really well in a class and then just do terribly on a test, and it wouldn't make any sense because I like understood the information, but just didn't. I don't know. I guess just didn't know how to like regurgitate it in the proper way and whatever it was. So that's definitely something that has been like a challenge for me. But then, as just when you get up into higher education, it's like, I don't know, some of my professors just, they understand the differences of learning and that it's not all about, um, doing a timed test and filling in, choosing the right answer. It's more about conversation and elaboration on a topic or whatever and more about like discussion, and that's really what I've enjoyed um and I guess kind of like realized is my way to go. So it's just, I don't know, it's been a process.
So, how does Tourette's play into that overall in the academic environment? I mean, has it been mostly a disruptive part of it, or an interfering part of it, or an inspiring part of it, or how do you explain that?
um it's been really it's been a strange kind of like aspect of my learning and
Hmm.
um and just how I've I guess developed as a person. But it's something that like I wasn't diagnosed super young. I mean, I guess younger than some, but like I was diagnosed when I was 15.
Okay.
And I definitely struggled with it a little when I was in elementary school, but it wasn't something that was very noticeable. Um, and then I definitely struggled with it a lot in middle school, and it was something that I still kind of hid. And I don't have very severe Tourette's. And obviously it comes and goes in waves, just like how most people it is worse at sometimes than others. But
Yeah.
it's something that I started having issues within middle school, but also middle school is a very, a time of a lot of just a lot is going on, and you're like kind of going into
Sure.
this weird teenage phase, and
Yeah.
everything's just kind of weird and confusing, and
Hmm.
you start actually kind of having to do schoolwork. And so I think I just struggled a lot with it there, but it was still something that wasn't diagnosed because my when we asked my um pediatrician about it, she just said, oh, well, tics are very common in young kids, and a lot of times they'll grow out of them. And my mom had said, oh, I had a few tics, and so did my sister when we were little, and we grew out of them, and it wasn't really a serious thing. And so
Right.
that was just kind of like was expected to happen, and then they just didn't go away, and they kind of continued to become worse, and it started to interfere with my schoolwork. And so that was kind of part of the reason I wanted to get diagnosed. I mean, well, part of the reason we looked further into what it might be, because it was almost like I kind of consider it a bit of a learning disability, and sometimes because it was,
Hmm.
even though it wasn't affecting my like mental learning at all times, it was difficult. Like I remember in high school, maybe freshman year or so, just trying to do my homework. And this one tick that I would do would be where I like tossed my pencil in the air a little bit, and I would
Huh.
have to catch it in this exact way. And that's
Yeah.
where kind of the OCD aspect comes in, where I had to catch it in the most exact way where it like touched my hand in two places like at the exact same time, and like this whole thing, which, is not impossible, but nearly impossible. And I would have to do it. And then there would be like this
Wow.
whole string of them that would come with it. So it would just be this like succession of all the ticks that I would do, and I would do them in order. And it would like end with that pencil one. And if I didn't do it right, then I had to start all over. And
Wow.
it just became really difficult. It was hard to finish my work. Like I physically couldn't do my work if I was trying to write something, because I just couldn't do it. I couldn't like finish my work until I had completed my tick cycle or whatever. And I mean, I used to actually kind of have these like tantrums, almost like these episodes of just being, it would be so frustrating, and I just couldn't stop doing it, and I would just, kind of burst into tears and just be so frustrated and not be able to do anything about it. And I remember one time it was so bad, and I was just like lying on the floor crying, and my mom's like, what is going on, like,
Wow.
what do I do? And I just like, it was, I don't know. And it was just this um really difficult time of not knowing what to do. And this was after I was diagnosed, but had no idea, like I wasn't on any sort of medication yet, and had no idea how to deal with anything or how to kind of calm myself down or any of that. So that was probably the biggest obstacle when it came to my education, and kind of considering it a bit of a learning hindrance, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was never too much of an issue at school, because for some reason I was always able to hide my tics a little bit when I was in a social setting.
Yeah.
And I think it could have, I mean, I really don't know where it came from, because it wasn't something that like I would consciously try to suppress,
Hmm.
but I think it could have been, just that, um, I don't know, when you kind of have a different persona when you're going out into public and out into the real world, and you're basically have yourself together and have just like a certain way you conduct yourself. And I guess that just kind of was something that helped hide my tics, but that also
Yeah.
could have been just because I wasn't as comfortable with myself when I was younger, I guess. Because now that I'm older and I'm more comfortable with myself and just how I am as a person, I've noticed that I'm don't like when I'm in social settings, I don't hide my tics as much. And it's strange because I've noticed that over the years, but it wasn't something that I consciously tried to do before or consciously don't do now. It's just kind of like happened like that. Luckily, it hasn't caused too much um of trouble in school. It's more of kind of been with myself and at home, and kind of struggling to battle with like my tics, and composing myself and being able to be in an okay like state of mind. Um and, while simultaneously being a student and, doing whatever work I have to do and whatever that is, especially getting into college, it's hard you're doing so much all the time, and it becomes really difficult. Like the schoolwork becomes difficult, but you still have to be social, have it, like sleep, do work, and then stay sane. So it's kind of like difficult, but I've gotten better at kind of controlling it and being able to help myself be okay.
I mean, it kind of makes me have to think about myself a little bit because I don't always notice when I tic. I feel like I'm always aware that someone might perceive me as odd because I just did something that they're not used to. Like I just tic somehow, but that's not constant. I mean, I guess it's on my mind all the time in one way, but I don't know if it's always on the surface of my mind. And so what you said earlier really kind of makes me think and kind of wonder if I do kind of recalibrate my head when I go out in public in terms of sort of like this unassigned black ops part of my brain has to kind of tamp down these tics because when I'm walking down the street, people are minding their own business, or they're looking at their phones or something like that. So I don't feel like I'm understudy there. But that's, I don't know, that's so interesting though, about being potentially calibrated to kind of deal with the real world when the situation or the social environment might not necessarily readily understand what Tourette's is. And if you explain it and say, I have Tourette's, then all of a sudden all these alarms go off with people who don't get it. They know the caricature of it. Right. They know the pop culture version of it.
Right, exactly. And then they just kind of like come to these assumptions, and they might not necessarily think poorly of you, but they just, they have this whole set of things that come to mind, and it's just a whole different way of thinking about it. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the whole thing with just like, I kind of was just realizing more of it as I was explaining about how I was, different when I was younger and now, and just the difference between being in public and being in private. But just, I mean, kind of the same thing as what you were saying, where it's just like when I was comfortable, and that was something that my parents would always take note of. They'd be like, oh, were your tics especially bad at school today? Because, they were especially bad that evening. And I would say, no, it was just kind of this thing where almost like I would come home and just drop this, like, it just drop this mask or whatever, which sounds like I was pretending I was a different person, which wasn't true. It was just kind of like the relaxation, I guess, of being at home, like just being in that comfort, in the comfortable environment of being with, my parents and my family is just, I don't know. It just like they would just kind of come out, and I would just start taking like crazy, and it's almost like there was like a buildup from the day, and and that definitely used to happen, but I mean, I don't know. It's weird because it's not quite the same now. And I think that might just be because I'm more comfortable with who I am as a person, or I'm not as concerned with conducting myself in. I think it's like now I just naturally conduct myself in a more, I don't know, socially acceptable way than probably I would have when I was really little, And it's just that same kind of thing where it's like, maybe that's just, I don't know, part of my like persona now, and the fact that I'm just kind of like weird, and I've accepted that, like, as, just as a person, and so I don't have as much of a, I guess, mask per se when I am out in public or whatever it is. But yeah, no, it's kind of, I didn't really put it together as much until right now when I'm just talking about the difference between like what it's like now. And I mean, also I'm kind of lucky with some, like a lot of my tics I think are relatively, could be like normal movements. Like they don't stand out as completely striking.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, part of the reason. I don't know, just like my whole life, it's been, people are like, oh, I would tell them that I'd have Tourette's, and I had no idea, they never would have suspected it, except for some of my like really close friends or whatever. But, and I would just feel like, yeah, well, there's like, I mean, now that I've mentioned it, I guarantee you, or if like I tell you the tics that like the most common ones that I do, I guarantee you'll see them now. And it's just something that like you couldn't notice them you didn't notice them as much before because of the fact that they were, I mean, kind of normal movements, I guess. It's just that I would, the fact that I do it repeatedly and I don't really have control over it, that's the part that made them, a tic. And then, so it's something that like, I guess I've always considered more like on the milder side, but maybe that's just because I'm comparing myself, which I used to compare myself to the more idea that you would have of like just Tourette's in general, which is such a wide spectrum of a disorder that it's like you can't compare at all. But I guess I used to think that like I had milder Tourette's because it wasn't not noticeable to other people. But I think it's one of those things. The debilitating aspect of it comes to like for example, one of the tics I used to do was extend my arm, and that's something that's not super noticeable, and it's not like a tic that would cause a lot of issues, I guess. But
I did something totally similar. It's kind of funny, and I would try to play it off like I was doing something else.
Right.
Yeah.
But that comes to what makes it debilitating is that I would do it so often, and sometimes it'd be so bad that I've like hyperextended my arm, like, and then I'd be sore, and it's that kind of thing where it's like, well, it's not some sort of foul movement tic like where like flipping somebody off or punching into the air, where that's like more kind of obvious, but it's caused issues nonetheless, in the sense of it, some of my tics have caused me like pain in the past because they'll just be that bad. And so it's kind of this like almost hidden painful thing that I had to deal with, which it's not like it's always like that, but it's just, it doesn't seem as debilitating unless you're actually feeling like the effects of it, I guess.
If you talk about your tics, do you feel triggered to actually tic? I mean, when it comes to me, if I discuss my tics, especially old ones that I don't do anymore, they come back. Do you run into that?
That's sometimes happened to me before, but not normally with like really old ones that I haven't done in a long time. But sometimes I'll have one like resurface real quick, just for like maybe a day or just whatever. I don't know, and just kind of like that's interesting that I'm doing that tic again. I haven't done that in a while, but and then kind of thinking about it will make me want to do it. But it's more of the ones. I have the worst problem with that when I'm talking about one that I like currently do, because like I might not be having like, my day might be, not that bad in the sense of I'm not doing my tics like a ton. But then if I'm, talk about it, for example, or think about it, or try to be like, I'm not going to think about it, then of course if I'm thinking about it and I do them. But that mostly happens to me, I think, with the current ones, but it's happened to me before with old ones that I don't really do anymore.
I did an interview a little bit earlier this evening, and I was bringing up some of my old tics, and I mentioned one of them, and I'm doing it now. It's one that I haven't thought about in a few months. It just hasn't manifested at all, but I feel like it's going to keep me up now. And it's a bizarre tic where I'll move the muscles around the inside of my ear to kind of make it pop like I'm trying to clear it. And it's really, really odd.
You do, you clear your ears? Because that's one that I've always done.
Crazy.
It's so funny. I've never heard of that. And you can't explain it. It doesn't look, or at least for me, it's like you can't see it. And I got so good at doing it where that nobody could see it. But it was one of those ones.
It's invisible. Yeah. And I mean, it keeps me up at night when I do it. Oh yeah, same. And I've kind of wondered if I'm doing myself some sort of like, ear damage or it's...
Have you ever, has it ever caused you pain?
Yeah. I mean, so I do it in one ear. It used to be both. Now it's just my left, and it's my left right now because I'm doing it right now. But yeah, after a while, my body really starts to hate me. Like my ear will start cussing me out because it's really, if you think about it, I mean, it's pretty steady. It's got to be thousands of times a day. Right.
Yeah. No, that's one of the ones that I've kind of had over the years consistently. That was one of my first ones, I think. And and when I was younger, it'd be like, just cleaning your ears like you would do when you're, on a plane or going, whatever that is, like that kind of thing, that kind of feeling. And so I used to do it where, I'd fully like open my mouth, like really try to pop my ears. But then as I did it more and more, I kind of got more sly about it. And so now I can do it without even, you can't, nobody else can see it. And so it's like hard to explain because, I mean, how do you explain, like, oh, clear your ears, you pop your ears, like whatever. But, but the part that like, I used to do it so often that like one time I was doing it and I was slightly sick or something. I mean, I don't know. I think I just had like a slight sore throat or something, but that with my ear, I felt like I had a full on, like it hurt to the extent of having like a full on ear infection. Like, I mean, I don't even know. I haven't had an ear infection since I was probably like a baby. So I don't even remember what it feels like, but it's gotta have been something like that, where it's like this pain from the most internal part of my ear, like all the way down to my throat kind of thing. And it was so painful. And the worst part about it is that with these tics that like you do so much until you're raw, you still have to do them. And so it's just like this awful thing. Like you think that if you're causing yourself that much pain doing it, that you would stop, that your body wouldn't continue to make you do it, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
And that's got to be one of the most frustrating things, I think, for me with
absolutely
battling with Tourette's and everything.
I mean, what do you remember were your earliest tics and kind of how did they manifest and were you confused? Were you just kind of how did all that play out in the earliest days?
Well, I think like the earliest one that I can remember was something that, or it was one, I had like one or two that I did back, it's in elementary school, maybe in like 4th grade or something. Third, 4th, 5th grade, somewhere around then. I can't really remember anymore, but which is interesting because I've heard of people like remember the very first tic they ever did the first day of whatever, and I'm like, I have no idea. I just remember it started happening. Because I don't think I noticed it back then. But one of the first ones I did was it's kind of hard to explain. Basically, I'd have like my arms kind of crossed in front of me, and I'd do this motion where I'd kind of move one arm above the other, like it was this opening and closing of my arms, kind of. That's like the best way I can describe it. And it was just, again, one of those ones that's about like the feeling of like the sensation of having like one arm touch the other in a certain area in a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think that was
so you had to get it perfectly to get it right.
Yeah. And so that was something that I kind of like did and I noticed. And it was funny because I had one of my elementary school best friends. She had tics too, sort of, but like very mild. And it was something that we both kind of, I guess it was part of the reason we probably both didn't really notice it or know it because we both would do these little things and they were just kind of these little idiosyncrasies that were pretty much normal and weren't very noticeable to anybody. And I remember because we used to I was in a few plays in elementary school, like little productions, and they would be videotaped by one of the parents in the crowd. And I remember it must have been like in 6th or 7th grade. My friend had found one of the videos, like the tapings, and was watching it. And she texted me and she was like, I don't know, saw me at school or something. She's like, hey, so I was watching this video and I totally saw we were both doing our tics on stage. And like, nobody know. I mean, it was just something, she's like, we were just totally doing them casually on stage and like, and it's weird because we didn't notice it then. And then like, you look back at it like a few years later and you're like, oh my God, how did I not notice that I was doing that before? So that was kind of a funny memory of like, I know I was at least doing them back then. And because other than that, I don't really remember them much until middle school, because that was when they really got bad. But I mean, I don't know, some of my earliest ones were like, I would crack my neck. And I think that's what's caused me now. Now I can like just totally crack my neck, like do just that thing where I just kind of move my head to the side and it just cracks.
Like the thing people do in movies before they're about to get into a fight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I can just totally do that with my neck. And it's straight out of the movies. And, and sometimes people are like, whoa, dang. And it's not a tic anymore that I do, but it's something I think has caused me to be able to do that. So it sounds really intense and everything. So it's interesting that some of these things have like kind of stuck with me. But I don't really do much of the same ones that I did at the very beginning, except for maybe clearing my ears. That was, I remember, a pretty early one, but I don't do it a ton anymore. But like sometimes that's one of the ones that will randomly come back. And, you know, I'll kind of do it for a day to a week or whatever, and it'll just kind of go back away again. And but it's strange because I also don't. I've never noticed starting a new tic like the first time I do it and being like, oh damn, that's a tic, that's a new one that's about to you know, take over my life. You know, I've never had that experience.
Yeah, I never have either. I've always just kind of come into the realization of it and thought like, how long have I been doing that? Like, I think I remember doing that the other day. What you know, what's you know, and maybe at that point I'd be like, okay, this is a new tic. I'm going to have to get to know.
You know, I'd be interested to know that, or I'd be interested in being able to think about that and maybe go back and see like, okay, well, a new tic surfaced that day, I guess. Surfaces, that's why I can think of it. And it's like, okay, well, what was going on that day? Was there something that happened that maybe caused me, you know, anxiety that maybe was why a new one kind of came up or something?
Yeah, you could identify your triggers.
Exactly. Because I really don't, like, the closest thing I have to knowing of a trigger is just, it's kind of anxiety induced. And I've never been officially diagnosed with anxiety, but it's like just different things that happen are kind of like exacerbated with anxiety, but not always bad anxiety. It could be like good anxiety, like I remember when I was first going to college, I was super anxious, like in a good way, really excited to go to school and just the anticipation, and that caused them to be worse and stuff like that. So.
And something you said earlier that you had that I didn't have, which was somebody I knew personally or could talk to who was my age, who also had Tourette's. I mean, that had to make things a little bit easier.
Well,
I don't want to make any assumptions, but I mean, what was that like?
It's interesting because I don't, like, that was when we were really little, and I don't think she was ever been diagnosed with Tourette's. Like, I think it was something that she just had tics and grew out of as well. But it wasn't ever something that like we really talked about, or something like we were never really going through the same thing. And so as much as it was kind of interesting to be like, you know, back then where I think it might have made the initial years of dealing with tics and Tourette's, and might have made that a little bit easier in the sense of like I didn't really notice it at all when I was younger. And you know, that could have possibly been because of her being around. But
that's interesting too, this like normalization aspect to it.
Yeah, but like other than her and that little, you know, bit when I was little, I've never met anybody else with Tourette's or that I know of, or any of that. So it's kind of like part of the reason I was really excited to help you out with this and just do this and be a part of this was I've never had that kind of community, like how you were saying, where when you were younger, you had a bit of a community and you've kind of fell out of touch with that. Like I've never had that at all. And I really would love to be able to have that and kind of find that. And I mean, just being somebody that's, I don't know, like a little older than most people when they're diagnosed, and being able to kind of be that, like, I don't know, just an older figure that's like, hey, you're going to be fine. But also at the same time, I'm worried because I'm at that stage in their life where a lot of people I know, sometimes their Tourette's will stop, or they're in their mid-20s, or like sometimes it'll kind of go away or lessen, and sometimes it gets worse. I've heard of that, and so I'm a little bit nervous about that right now in my life, just because I'm 21 now, so that's something that is could change in the future, which I'm kind of nervous about, because you know, I don't know how I'm going to be able to deal with it if it gets worse or whatever. But I think it'd be really great to be able to have a community to be able to not necessarily rely on, but just have there. And I also have been really interested as of lately into trying different things, like new types of therapy or whatever it is, because I'm currently I take a medication that helps reduce anxiety so that I have less like anxiety induced tic episodes and whatnot. And I haven't really done a whole lot of other work to, I don't know whether it's like some sort of therapy, like cognitive therapy or hypnotherapy. I've also heard is something that people might do or whatever. And I just haven't done any of that. So, it'd be interesting to kind of learn from other people and what they've done and what's been helpful, even though every person is different,
Yeah. Well, do you have things that sort of like a go-to activity to where you find yourself a little bit more free of stress or anxiety or anything like that would trigger tics?
Well, I got more into meditation, and I've tried to do that, and that's something that I would do as kind of my escape. Like if I could feel myself being, I don't know, if I was just really anxious or just getting kind of worked up or whatever, I would meditate or just kind of do. I don't know, people are like, I don't know how like you meditate, especially if like you have ADD, isn't your mind everywhere? And I'm like, well, the whole thing is just kind of like getting myself into a separate conscious, like you don't have to have your mind blank. That's not the point of meditation. It's about just kind of relaxing and letting everything, like maybe trying to just focus on one specific thing and just kind of putting yourself in like your favorite place on earth or something and whatever. So that's been something that I've kind of done, I think, more in college. And so meditation, that was definitely helpful for a while. But this year actually has been, I feel like my Tourette's has gotten worse and meditation wasn't really working. I was still kind of like not able to fully relax. And to be completely honest, this has been something that's been really hard for me lately, is not really having any other escape from having really bad days except for just sleeping. And it's been really hard because it's kind of something that I feel like I should have some other way to be able to escape this other than, or be able to help this other than sleep. But sleep is like really the only escape. And so like I would just take a nap if I was really, feeling crappy, but that's not productive and something that I don't want to depend on. And that's, it doesn't get rid of it for me. It's just like, and it's just kind of, I don't really know how to describe it other than just kind of like giving up almost with this year and kind of my tics were a lot worse this past quarter for me. And that's something, where I kind of started like being interested in trying other therapies or just trying something new to get into to help relieve feeling of helplessness, with tics and everything. So, but I haven't really been able to get into that yet because the time and mental commitment that it takes to trying new medications or, doing something new. It's just doing some sort of like cognitive therapy, you really have to put in time and energy into it. And it's something that's hard for me to do as a college student who's, trying to finish up school right now. And I'm, working a little bit of the week and trying to figure out what I'm going to do next year and like my future and all of that. It's hard to,
oh man, it's a hard time.
I'm very reluctant or I have been very reluctant, to like start something new because it's just like, I remember in the past, like in high school and stuff, I mean, just how long it took me to finally find the medication that I'm on. I mean, just so long of going in, trying medication. It ended up like exactly, ADD medications exacerbated my tics or like they didn't work or all this stuff. And I always had to be listening to my body and listening to my like head and it being just an extra, thing that I had to be aware of every day, which I think helped me actually a lot with who I am as a person in the sense of that I'm, very aware of myself and I know how I work like very well. But at the same time, I mean, it's a huge commitment, both, energy and time wise. And it's something that like that's why I've been so hesitant to start something new for a while, but it's gotten to a point where I really feel like I need to try something else. I'm willing to do that now.
So a lot of experimentation, and I get that frustration too, because you kind of create an anxiety for yourself if you run through a gamut of things and you felt like, well, God, I just spent the last year, on a series of failed experiments, or
Right.
But at the same time, it is also kind of going down the list of what doesn't work for you at this point in your life, and you are kind of getting closer to something that might actually do the trick for you. But, at the same time, do you see Tourette's as something that you just want to manage better, or something that you want to overcome? I think there could be a mix of answers there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I've never really thought about that much, because it's, getting rid of it altogether hasn't ever really been an option. I feel like, it's just something that there's no cure for it, and there's no exact medication for it. And it's not there's no exact science around it. So I guess I've never really kind of thought of that as an option, just because I know it isn't one at this point.
There's no cure. Yeah.
But, it's kind of hard to say what I would do if I had the option. I mean, I think if I really had the option to get rid of it, I would. And it's been something that has, been a big part of my life so far. And not that I wouldn't change anything about how I've grown up and whatnot, because, that's what's made me who I am today. But, I mean, I also wouldn't wish what I went through on anybody else. And I know I haven't even had the worst of it, and I've been very, lucky with my life, and my family being, supportive, and just with everything. So it's like, I think having it as a part of my life has been, I don't want to say beneficial. It's just been a part of it. My main, I think, goal from here and the next kind of step of what I decide to do, in the sense of therapies or medications or whatever it is just for managing it, and being able to, understand where things come from, know how to maybe like switch certain tics from one thing to be able to kind of like divert it to another tic. That if that, I've heard that that's kind of possible. People like do that sometimes. And I've actually kind of done it before by myself, where I like slightly change a tic so it's less like harmful, but still gets that feeling out of the way. And
how did you do that? Like what modifications?
It was actually a vocal tic. It was like I did this kind of like snorting sound that was in the back of like my throat, but like upper part, like I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it was really bad, and it was very like distracting, and caused issues within my house. I mean, it was something like at one point it was so bad, this is in early high school, so bad that I or no, this is before I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed. So I remember it was so bad that I was doing it every few seconds, and my dad went crazy. He was like, Madeline, like, stop this. You like just stop, or like do like whatever, blah, blah. And I would be like, I can't. He's like, what do you mean you can't? Like, just like try, whatever. And it's this whole thing of like, so I don't know. It was just awful, like helplessness. And that was before I was diagnosed. So it was before it was truly like, hey, yo, she really can't not do this,
Right.
So, it was, it kind of turned into one of those painful tics that would like give me like sore throats and stuff. And so I was able to kind of like change it at one point. It was after doing it for a really long time. So I think it was something that I don't know, I've done it so many times that I guess I kind of understood how to modify it. And it wasn't an easy thing, but I just kind of moved I was able to relieve the same feeling with doing like this slightly different, like it was more of like a swallowing thing than a snorting thing, or like, all right, I was able to do it without making as much of a sound, I guess. So it was like this slight modification that I was able to do that was basically still the same tic. I didn't really like move it from one place to another, but I guess because I'd done it so much that I was able to like manipulate it so that I wasn't making the sound, so it wasn't as like infuriating for those around me. Whatever.
That's interesting. Just hitting the same target by doing something a little bit different,
Yeah.
kind of appeasing the Tourette's gods or fooling your own Tourette syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the best analogy is or if it even matters, but I mean, that's really interesting. That's something I've never consciously tried to do. Like maybe I know my tics have evolved and they've kind of fluctuated and changed and become, but I don't know if, to my knowledge, I've never tried to do it. It may be the kind of thing where the self-preservation part of my mind kicks in. And it's like, all right, we got to do something different.
Right.
And, or else something bad's going to happen. And then I have like some sort of evolved tic, based on what I had before. But that's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
I've never done that.
I think I've like kind of tried to do that with something else, but it didn't necessarily work the same way. And it's just one that I still currently do. And it's probably one of the worst ones I've done because it's so obvious. I like do this, I like scratch under my nose, and it originally started as basically there's kind of this tension, like right where your nose meets your upper lip, like right there. And it was something that I would just at first, like kind of just, it was about stretching it out. So kind of like, make a face where the skin would be like stretched there. And, and then that ended up not being enough. So it kind of evolved into where I've had to actually physically, kind of stretch the skin with like my finger.
Wow.
And then that like wasn't enough. And then I would have to do it with my nail where I'd actually just press into it. And I think I kind of tried to do that instead of pulling at it because then it would irritate my skin there. And this is something that I've been doing for a few years now, I think. And I've gone through stages of it being so bad where like I would have like when my tic would go away for a while, like it wouldn't really be that bad. I would still have a scar. I still have a scar under my nose, but it's something that like it gets really bad and it just irritates my skin so much. And I guess scratch my skin enough where that it like builds up this like huge scab and I like made myself bleed there and like it will be like super painful. But of course I still have to do it. Doesn't matter how painful or how atrocious it gets. And it'll just be like a huge, like my skin will get all inflamed and like there'll be kind of like a big scab buildup, whatever there. And it's just like right under my nose. And so that's been something that's been, I think, the most obvious because it's on my face and like other people can see it. And then it's something that I like, I'm doing something with my hand on my face. So it's kind of obvious in that sense too. Like other people can notice, like see the tic. And, I've been asked before, like, what's that under your nose? Like, or what happened or whatever. And like, no, I just scratched myself. Like, so that's an easier explanation than, for people that I don't really know or don't know that I have Tourette's or whatever. But that's been one of the most difficult ones. And it's, just constantly, it's, one of the painful ones because it gets to the point of like bleeding or like so much skin buildup and then it cracks. And, just like how whenever you would have like some other, I don't know, like when you have dry skin or something and in cold weather or whatever or dry weather and then it like cracks and that kind of like, pain. And it's just so frustrating. And it's something that I've kind of like, it's evolved over the years, but I've tried different ways of like getting rid of that feeling, the tension through something else other than, using like my nail or using the edge of my finger so that it causes less damage to the skin there. So I've it's one of those ones that I guess is kind of a little bit changeable of how I'm actually doing the tic because it's all about the feeling, not actually like the motion necessarily.
Okay. So that's kind of like identifying the core of like what you need when you're ticking
it's
or
like
what
that
you're
tension that's there. I just need to get rid, like, it's just a certain feeling and there's multiple ways to achieve that. So it's one that I've like kind of tried to change and like do different versions to get rid of that or like to get the exact feeling to be the least destructive to my face. But like, there's still only so much. And, if I'm doing it often enough, there's only so much you can do. And before, or like, I don't know, it's still kind of over time. If you're doing it that much, then it's going to be still harmful, I guess. But yeah.
You know what? I did just think of something that I have tried to do that does fit into this category. So one of my tics is I will open my eyes really wide. Like I'll just kind of like, not like an eye roll, but like I'll open my eyelids as wide as I can get them, and I'll kind of look to the side. It's really,
that's a really common one, I know.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's kind of cartoony feeling when I do it, but I do remember now this time period where I experimented with just holding my eyelids open with my fingers to see if I could like get that feeling of having my eyes open, to see if that could appease me for a longer period of time. I do remember trying that, but I also remember still doing that same old tic afterwards. So I guess it didn't take, but that's funny.
That's a tic actually that I had like briefly, like it kind of like did for a little while, and it was interesting because I, you know, have read that that's one of the common like first ones, and one of the tell signs of younger kids having like Tourette's is a lot of times like some sort of eye movement, eye roll, like blinking, whatever. And I was like, I don't know if I ever had that when I was little, but then all of a sudden I kind of had it like end of last year, and I was just kind of like, it kind of just came up, and was doing it for a while, and I was just like, it was kind of interesting that this is one of, you know, I have far more complex tics that I've done, and then this one is like showing up later, but you know, it is what it is. There's no rhyme or reason to any of this really. So,
you know, we've been going for a bit now. You know, what do you think the biggest takeaway should be from this? You know, whether it's something for you and building a sense of community, or something you want people on the outside to know about Tourette's and what you deal with, or all of the above. I mean, what do you think is the most important thing for you in this?
Well, of course, as I said earlier, like what I personally hope to take away from this is just like, you know, finding a little bit more sense of community, being a part of something. I mean, what I really want to take away from this is what I can give to like other people for this, because I mean, I think one of the most important things for people to know, like those with Tourette's, like especially younger people, is that like you can learn to deal with it. Like it can be difficult, but you know, and as much as it sucks, like you can still, you know, be a regular person. You're not weird or bad because of having Tourette's and because of having tics. You know, I think I'm weird. I mean, I'm just a weird person for other reasons, you know, other than that. And that's just a part of it. And it, you know, sometimes it does really suck. And, you know, that you can't really say it in any nicer way than that. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, like it really can suck, but there's also a lot of, I don't know, it's made me a stronger person. And there's a lot that I feel like I can, you know, I've gone through stuff like having Tourette's and whatever, and I'm still, I think, like successful for where I am in my life right now, and for in the least like a braggadocious way possible. You know, I'm a smart young woman that's going to be doing something. I just want to do something big with my life, and so I know I'm going to be able to do that, and I'm doing that despite the fact that, you know, I have Tourette's, or I mean, that's not something that has to hold you back. I think that's just like the biggest thing that people should be able to take away from, that have Tourette's could take away from this, but also that people that don't have Tourette's. I mean, I think it'd be so helpful for more people to understand Tourette's in the best way that you can without actually having it, and just that it's so different for each person, and just the fact that, hey, this tic might be really annoying, but they really can't help it, so like you're gonna just have to deal with it and like understand, sympathize. I just hope that more people learn about Tourette's and how it affects people, and that it's different for everyone, and it's something that it really sucks for us. You know, we don't want to be doing the tics. So like, if you don't like, if you don't like that we're doing a certain tic, like imagine how we feel, kind of thing.
Episode 1. To repeat, quote, "Many of my friends can't even see what I'm describing, yet this has been the biggest challenge in my life. It's part of my identity, it's part of me, and I'm okay with it." End quote. From Maddie's college entrance essay. So, like I said, this was a build-up to where we kind of got to know each other and we plowed toward the heavy stuff. And that's how organic conversations go. And, having it unfold that way really helped me to get to know Maddie and to learn from what she's been through and how it overlays a lot with what I've experienced. But then hearing how she's settled with it, well, settled is the wrong word, how she came to terms with it, even though she still has a struggle, but how she's not letting it sign her checks. She's owning it as part of her life, even when it's bad. And she wants to connect with you and build community and share what she's been through with other people who might benefit from hearing that story, younger people. And I gotta say, as somebody older than her, I'm a beneficiary of that. So Maddie, thank you. That was really, really great. And that's just the first of many that this podcast has coming up. And it's actually truly changed me. So, please, feedback. I'm a total failure if I don't spark a conversation, so let's have it. Again, a Facebook group is on the way. Honestly, if anyone wants to help out with that, I'm totally welcoming. You can find me on Twitter. The handle is @TourettesPod. Use the hashtag TourettesPod as well, so we can collect our thoughts in one place and all kind of have a common place to go. You can also and should email me, tourettespodcast@gmail.com. As this thing evolves, there may be changes and developments and improvements as appropriate, and so I do also welcome critiques that might help to that end and help this podcast really become what it's supposed to be. So thanks again. My name is Ben, and we'll be back next week. This is the Tourettes Podcast.